Hello everyone. Welcome to the second lecture of the fifth module, which is on charge trap flash memories and 3D NAND flash cells. The disclaimers remain the same. So now with this understanding about organization of these flash arrays in the ICs, let us go ahead and look at another flavor of this flash memory, which is known as the charge trap memory. So what happens in this charge trap memory is, on the right hand side you have this floating gate cell, and on the left hand side you have this charge trap cell. So the only difference between the floating gate cell and the charge trap cell is, let me write it as well. So you replace this floating gate, which kind of stores the charge, with an insulator or a dielectric. But how is a dielectric supposed to store charges? So you use a dielectric which has a large number of traps. If there are no traps, you induce traps within the dielectric. And these traps can store electrons which have kind of come to them via channel, via tunneling or any other mechanism. And another important point about these traps are that these traps within your storage layer or dielectric in charge trap memory are discrete, unlike the floating gate unit. So floating gate is kind of a metal, so it's kind of a continuous. Whatever electron is present on a metal surface, it can kind of move throughout the metal surface. It can move throughout the metal volume. However, that is not the case with your storage layer. So in your storage layer, your kind of traps are discrete, and your electrons can reside in only those discrete locations, and they're not free to move within your storage layer. They can move via hopping, but not all electrons are free to move throughout your storage layer. Okay. So what can be these storage layers? So the most popular storage layers that people use are silicon nitride, Si3N4, or aluminum nitride, ALN. This ALN is CMOS compatible, Si3N4 is CMOS compatible, so that way process complexity is reduced. So now a question arises that why should we even go from floating gate to charge trap memory? Because floating gate is kind of a very mature technology. So there are several reasons for that. Let me just list those reasons. So the first reason is that it's very easier to fabricate. Since we just have to deposit another dielectric, I mean you just deposit the tunnel oxide, then you deposit the dielectric, then you deposit the blocking oxide, and then you have the control gate, which is again a polysilicon. That polysilicon has been replaced by metal gates in the recent charge trap memories or recent floating gate memories. But just for the discussion, let us assume that it's still polysilicon. So it is easier to fabricate as compared to introduction of a floating gate, which is again a polysilicon. So this can be done with only one vacuum process. I mean, you create vacuum once, then you deposit your tunnel oxide, then you deposit your storage layer, that is your Si3N4, and then you deposit your blocking oxide, which is again an oxide. However, for this process, like for the floating gate, you have to break the vacuum after you deposit your tunnel oxide, then again deposit floating gate, that is polysilicon via CVD, then again use vacuum, and then again you have to use different processes. For tunneling oxide, most probably you'll use atomic layer deposition, since you want very high quality, very thin dielectric. And then for floating gate, you need a CVD. Whereas here, you can kind of do everything using atomic layer deposition itself. So it's easier to fabricate, and that way it's also cheap. It's more scalable. Why it's more scalable? Because once you place two floating gate cells very close to each other, let me just draw that. So if you place, let's say this is one floating gate cell, this is another floating gate cell. If you place them very close to each other, so the interaction, as you bring them closer, the interaction between, so let me write it, interaction between your floating gate increases significantly, and it causes something which is known as neighbor disturb effect. Neighbor disturb effect. So you want to program this, you apply some voltage on this. However, because of this parasitic coupling, even the state of this floating gate changes. I mean, this also impacts the state of the other floating gate, which is very close to it. So just because there is no such floating gate in your charge trap, it's kind of scalable. You can bring two charge trap cells as close to each other as possible. There are other coupling mechanisms, however, that we'll discuss when we will be covering, the reliability of these three, like charge trap memories. The other point which is really important is related to the retention. So, as I told you, this floating gate over here, which is here, is kind of a polysilicon, but it's treated as a metal. So it's a continuous surface on which the electrons may move. So if you have something like a continuous channel formed because of SILC or any other mechanism between your channel and your floating gate. So let me write that as well. So if you have a continuous channel of traps formed because of program erase, stress, or whatever, formed because of program erase, stress, or whatever reason in tunnel oxide, all electrons within floating gate will traverse to channel. Why so? Because this floating gate is a kind of metal, and all the electrons are free to move across the surface of this metal. So all the electrons which are stored in the floating gate, they kind of, let me just show it over here. So all the electrons which are on this floating gate, they kind of, go towards the channel through this kind of a continuous channel of traps. However, in case of your storage layer, that is nitride, you have discrete traps. You have discrete traps like this. So in that case, even if you have a continuous channel here, only the electrons which are close to that continuous channel, close to the traps, like, let me just write that as well. So since the traps are discrete, in your nitride layer, only the traps, only the electrons, so only the electrons within the traps close to this kind of stray channel or whatever you call it, stray channel, move into substrate or channel region of your underlying MOSFET. So this way, the reliability, or I would say, this kind of improves retention behavior or mitigates the complete discharging of the storage layer through a single channel, through a single trap channel or straight trap channel, whatever you call that. So that is one bigger, that is one big advantage. Also, here you can kind of work with smaller or thinner tunneling oxide and use direct tunneling. So if you are using direct tunneling, the tunneling kind of improves, I mean the tunneling efficiency improves. And when your tunneling efficiency improves because of direct tunneling, your sense margin increases. Sense margin or memory window increases, but at the same time, your retention will also reduce, right? Because when you have a very thin insulator, then even the probability of back tunneling is kind of increased, right? So these are a few characteristics of this charge trap memory. Let me tell another thing which is really important, that this was conceived or this was conceptualized. Let me write that as well. So it was conceptualized way back in 1967. But at that time, the problem was the interface quality between this nitride and tunneling oxide was very bad. So they required at least 50 volts to move an electron from your substrate to your storage layer. So they didn't go with this. They went with this floating gate. And it was only in 2002 that, AMD and Fujitsu brought this CT memory into commercial purpose. With this discussion about the charge trap memory and its advantages, that a single point defect or a single channel defect in your tunneling oxide doesn't affect its operation much and kind of increases its yield. So let us move ahead and look at how you program and erase this charge trap memory. So let's look at how we can program or erase this charge trap memories. So let us just take the case of programming. So programming here also means injecting electrons from the channel or your PVL substrate into your storage layer through the tunnel oxide. So depending upon, as that was the case with your NAND flash memory or floating gate cells. So depending upon your barrier thickness, and what is your barrier here? Your barrier is the tunnel oxide. So depending upon tunnel oxide thickness and the electric field, that is the voltage you apply, for programming, two different mechanisms are possible. What are two different mechanisms? First, FN tunneling at the corner of this barrier. So electrons will tunnel from your substrate to the conduction band of this tunnel oxide, and from there they can kind of go towards your storage. And the second mechanism is your direct tunneling, DT. So what is the difference between these two? So FN takes place when your barrier is thick. Barrier is thick and field is high. And it takes place across this triangular barrier here, only in this region. So only the electrons which are kind of having energy close to this triangular barrier, potential barrier, they only tunnel from your PVL substrate towards your conduction band of your tunnel oxide. However, your direct tunneling, for this, the requirement is that your barrier should be thin, typically less than 4 nanometers, and electric field is, even if it's not that high, your direct tunneling takes place. So it may take place at a lower voltage. And what happens in direct tunneling is all these electrons which are there in the PVL at different energy levels, they can tunnel into your storage layer. So the advantage that it offers you is you'll have more number of electrons coming to the storage layer or tunneling into the storage layer. And if you have more number of electrons, what would that lead to? It would maximize your threshold voltage change. And that will increase your sense margin as well as your memory window. However, since your thickness is small, even back tunneling is equally possible, so retention issues can be there if you are using a very small kind of thickness of your tunneling oxide. And also, if your thickness is inherently small, then the effect of traps will be even higher. Now let us look at erase mechanism here, which is, so this was your program mechanism. Let us look at the erase mechanism, which is here. And erase is actually very interesting here. So let me write that as well. So in CT, erase mechanism is really interesting. Why so? So let me discuss that. So in erase mechanism, you apply fields in the opposite direction. So you have now fields applied along this direction. Here the fields were in this direction. So how do you determine the fields? It is kind of given by the slope of this barriers, potential barriers. So if your slope is in this direction, your field is in this direction, from left to right. Sorry, from right to the left. Just to the opposite. Okay. So what happens in erase? Charge from nitride layer, these electrons from nitride layer have to go back to your eval substrate. So you apply a large voltage and you achieve a large electric field. So the electrons from storage layer may tunnel, or that is what they call as detrapping here. Like if you look at this, they call it detrapping. So they kind of tunnel into your channel. So the main kind of underlying principle for this erase is you have to kind of get rid of all the electrons in your storage layer. So how you can do that? Either you extract electrons back to your channel, or you kind of send holes to the storage layer so that it annihilates those electrons. So even holes may be injected through your tunneling oxide into storage layer. And once these holes tunnel into the storage layer, what they'll do, they will annihilate the existing electrons. Recombine, like they'll recombine with those existing electrons, and that is how the electrons stored in your storage layers will be got rid of. However, at the same time, what happens here is there is also this FN tunneling because of this large electric field. There can be this FN tunneling from your gate electrodes towards through the blocking oxide towards your storage layer. So let me write that. Because of this large electric field, even electrons from control gate may tunnel into storage layer, and through what? Through your blocking oxide. So at one time, I mean, close to the tunneling oxide, the electrons are kind of coming towards the channel, or the holes are kind of tunneling towards the storage layer, and that is kind of annihilating these electrons. However, at the same time, electrons from the control gate may also kind of move towards the storage layer through FN tunneling, and then add electrons to the storage layer. So these two mechanisms are happening parallelly. So because of this, what happens is we are not able to extract all the electrons from nitride layer. So if you are not able to extract all the electrons from the nitride layer, it's not going to get back to its original position or your virgin position. So this leads to what is known as erase saturation. So you start with no electrons in your storage layer, then you program it, and then when you erase it back, it doesn't go back to its original or as manufactured position with no electrons in its storage layer, and this leads to what is known as erase saturation. So the VT won't be zero, the VT would be somewhat higher, just because there are some electrons in your storage layer even after performing erase mechanism. Even if you want to completely erase it, you won't be able to do that because of this back tunneling of electrons from your gate towards your storage layer through your blocking oxide. So to remove this or to mitigate this, what people do is they kind of engineer the blocking oxide. I'll let you know in later section of this class itself, but what people do is they kind of come with high band gap and high barrier blocking oxide. So instead of SiO2, what they use is Al2O3 in the blocking oxide. And this Al2O3 or sapphire, when they use it in the blocking oxide, this gives to something which is called tannose. So they use tantalum. So they use tantalum electrode, then Al2O3 blocking oxide. So that gives the name tannose. So that gives the name This gives T and A, and then you have nitride, oxide, and semiconductor. So you have this tanners. Okay, I'll discuss about it later as well. So now with this description about the arrays and program mechanism, let us go ahead and look at what are the different physical mechanisms that may lead to defect generation in the tunneling oxide as well as the blocking oxide during the program and erase processes. So let us first focus on the program mechanism, which is usually via Fn or dt. So what are the different kind of processes which may lead to defect generation? So let us focus on first the tunneling oxide. So what is happening here? So during program, electrons are tunneling from your channel to your storage layer, that is nitride, via direct tunneling or Fn. So this can lead to stress in the tunnel oxide. So this may degrade your tunnel oxide. Also, the holes in the storage layer may tunnel into your substrate or PV, whatever it is, and that will also lead to kind of a degradation in your tunnel oxide layer. So your tunnel oxide is degraded by these two processes, that is electrons tunneling from substrate to nitride and holes tunneling from nitride to substrate. Okay. Now let us focus on this blocking oxide layer during the program mechanism. So what are the mechanisms that can lead to its degradation? So there can be this, hot hole injection from your control gate to the storage layer. So this control gate is also a polysilicon layer in which the holes, or in which there can be this hot carrier effects, and because of this, these holes which are over here, which are having a very high energy, they may kind of get injected towards the storage layer through this anode hole injection mechanism. So this mechanism is called anode hole or anode hot hole injection mechanism. Hot hole injection mechanism. Hot electron effect in hot carrier injection in your NOR flash, what it will lead to is, it will lead to generation of interface states. Okay, and these interface states will in turn degrade the quality of your blocking oxide. Where are these interface states generated? So these interface states are generated at control gate blocking oxide interface. Now let us look at the different physical mechanisms that are happening in arrays, which may kind of degrade your tunnel oxide or your blocking oxide. What happens during the arrays mechanism is, first there is an injection of electrons or tunneling of electrons from your storage layer to your P-well. So this electron tunneling from your storage layer to P-well or channel or substrate, whatever you call it, this kind of degrades your tunnel oxide or stresses your tunnel oxide. And what would this do? This will lead to generation of interface traps. However, at the same time, there is also this tunneling of holes from here. So these holes can be even hot holes, because if your channel is subjected to large electric field, there can be hot carrier effects. So there can be this hot hole injection from your well, substrate or channel to your storage layer. And what this does is, it not only degrades the TO, but it also degrades your storage layer. Okay, so now that we know the different mechanisms and how they're affecting the quality of your tunneling oxide, your blocking oxide, and your storage layer. Let us go to the different retention issues in your charge trap memories. Although this is kind of immune against those point defects or localized defects, since your electrons are kind of stored in or trapped in delocalized or distributed traps. The trap sites are kind of discrete where your electrons are there. So before we get into this retention, let us look at this energy band profile. Before we go on and read about the different mechanisms which are possible for retention failure of this charge trap memory, let us convince ourselves that the energy band profiles given in this diagram is actually correct. So as I told you before, the direction of bending of this barrier kind of gives you the electric field direction. So here, if you go by that definition, the electric field direction is like this, and it's like this. So the fields are directed towards your nitride layer from the either side. Is that possible? Yeah, that's possible because you have electrons in nitride layer, right? So if you have electrons or a negative charge anywhere, then your field lines are always directed. So your field lines are always directed towards negative charges. So field line kind of starts at a positive charge and ends at a negative charge. So field lines from both these sides kind of start from there and then end up on the negative charges on the nitride layer. So this kind of profile is actually correct. Okay. Now what are the different mechanisms that are possible for these charges in the storage layer to leak out? So towards the left and towards the right hand side, these charges can tunnel into this substrate, or they can tunnel into this blocking layer conduction band as well. So let us first look at this trap to band tunneling mechanism. Trap to band tunneling mechanism. So it also has two components. So first component is trap to band tunneling using FN mechanism towards blocking oxide. That is this one. And the second one is trap to band tunneling using direct tunneling or FN, depending upon your tunneling oxide thickness, towards your tunnel oxide. Apart from that, there is another mechanism, which is this thermionic emission. So few of these electrons may be highly energetic and they may cross this barrier and jump over this barrier or jump over this barrier. So highly energetic electrons, and how these electrons become energetic? Through collisions in the nitride layer itself. So highly energetic electrons can be injected into your control gate or your substrate. How? If their energy is greater than the barrier height. However, there can be a retrapping as well. So an electron got energized, but it could not go beyond that barrier, and it again came back to this nitride layer itself. So that is also possible. So let me write that as well. So retrapping is also possible. Okay. So these are kind of the mechanisms which are responsible for loss of charge or leakage of charge from this nitride layer. And there are several engineering possible at different material level. For instance, you can engineer your tunnel oxide layer, you can engineer your blocking oxide layer, you can engineer your storage layer, so as to mitigate some of these issues like erase saturation and even your back tunneling from your blocking oxide and all those things. So let us browse through them very fast. So let us look at different innovations at these levels, or let us look at the different engineering of this stack, which kind of helps you to achieve a better performance. So first of all, let us focus on this tunnel oxide engineering. So usually people use SiO2 because of its very high quality interface properties and all with silicon. But people have also explored different kind of stacks. And one of the stacks which is most commonly used for this charge trap mechanism is a stack which is not exactly SiO2, which is not pure SiO2, but it's SiO2 and then combined with hafnium silicon oxynitride, HFSiON. So what are the properties of this HFSiON? So just like SiSiO2 interface, even this HFSiON has a low trap concentration. So the quality of interface is high. Also, if you look at, so in this curve, if you see, on the x-axis, we have plotted Vg by EOT, which is kind of giving you the electric field across oxide. So here they are comparing different stacks. So one of the stacks which is most commonly used is this SiO2 3 nanometer. So once it's 3 nanometers, then the mechanism is direct tunneling. And the second stack with which they have compared is SiO2 1 nanometer and HFSiON 6 nanometers. So here also tunneling will be direct tunneling. So depending upon the field, they have plotted the tunneling current or the gate current. So on y-axis, you have the tunneling current, and on the x-axis, you have your oxide field, TO field, tunneling oxide field. Okay, so if you look at this curve, you'll see that if you compare SiO2 3 nanometers and SiO2 1 nanometers and hafnium silicon oxynitride, you'll see that this is your oxynitride layer. So you see at low fields, the current is lower as compared to your SiO2. So let me just write that observation. So at low fields, the tunneling current is lower in this engineered, or what we call this is band gap engineered. So this is kind of band gap engineered tunnel oxide. So we call it BE. So BE stands for band gap engineering. So for this band gap engineered tunnel oxide at low electric fields, your tunneling current is smaller. What this means? This means that charge leakage at low fields would be smaller. So retention would be high. This amounts to a high retention. Okay. And second observation. At high electric fields, this is the tunneling current of your oxynitride or band gap engineered layer. And this is your tunneling current of the usual nitride or usual silicon oxide. So at high electric field, let me write that observation as well. So at high electric field, where you kind of program it, tunneling current is higher in the band gap engineered tunneling oxide as compared to your SiO2. So what this means? A higher tunneling current means larger injection of charges. So larger injection, that amounts to larger shift in VT. And a larger shift in VT, what that leads to is higher sense margin, or what it's also called? It's memory window, higher memory window. And also faster program, right? Because the larger the current, the faster the program is. So just by engineering your tunneling oxide, you can enhance the retention, and as well as you can make the program more faster, and you can increase the memory window. So this was the engineering that people did with tunneling oxide. So people also came up with innovative approaches or innovative materials for engineering your nitride layer or the storage layer. So two very common, as I told even before, two very common kind of dielectrics used for this storage purposes, Si3N4 and aluminum nitride. So what are the properties of aluminum nitride that makes it more promising? So the trap concentration is high in aluminum nitride. It has got a higher band gap. And a higher electron affinity value as well. So these kind of lead to a band gap engineering, which is more favorable. So here in this curve, people have just compared the memory characteristics, that is program and erase characteristics, program and erase VT characteristics, leading to different programming window and sense margins of cases where first is your ALN Si3N4 stack. So it's a stack of ALN Si3N4, which is kind of this. Second is pure ALN, and third is pure Si3N4. And you can see that the tunneling oxide values are different in the three cases. Why are the tunneling oxide thicknesses different? So as to have a uniform EOT. I mean, the effective oxide thickness has to be same for all these three stacks. Why the effective oxide thickness has to be same? So as to maintain the same electric field. If your effective thickness is changing just by introducing of different dielectrics, then what happens is your electric field will be different in different stacks, and that won't give you a very clear picture. So to have a fair comparison, they also change this tunneling oxide such that you have a equivalent electric field, and then you compare their performances. Okay. So with that kind of thing, what people observed was that in this case of ALN and Si3N4 stack, you see that the maximum VT versus the minimum VT, the range is very large. So what people observed experimentally was that your stack of ALN and Si3N4 yields maximum memory window. Also at the same time, let me tell you that in these structures, your blocking oxide was not SiO2. So usually, let me write that as well. So usually for blocking oxide also people use SiO2. Al2O3 blocking layer or a sapphire blocking layer, then it leads to a better performance. The back tunneling, the probability of back tunneling is kind of reduced. Also now let us focus on this stack. So what this stack does is, there are electrons which are kind of stored in Si3N4. What ALN gives them is, it kind of gives them a kind of intermediate layer where these electrons in Si3N4 can go to, and then from here they can again tunnel back into your P-well. So it also accelerates your erase. So this kind of storage layer, this kind of band gap engineering accelerates your erase. And how it does that? So what it does is, it kind of gives intermediate states over here. Like there are these states, there are these states over here, these energy states over here, in which the electrons from Si3N4 can go intermediately, and from here they can easily tunnel back into your P-well. So it kind of accelerates your erase mechanism as well. So just by doing this band gap engineering, you can kind of mitigate several kind of problems like erase saturation and retention issues, solve these problems. Now let us also look at the shape effects. I mean, can the shape of this, if changed from a rectangular kind of cross section to a cylindrical kind of cross section, if some shape engineering is done, how is it kind of going to affect your charge trap memory thickness? So let us look at this gate all around kind of charge trap memory, where this is your gate, this is your polysilicon channel, this is your tunneling oxide, this is your nitride layer, this is your blocking oxide, and then this is your gate. So here in gate all around charge trap memory, your channel is cylindrical. Then your gate kind of wraps around your channel from all sides. So if the gate is wrapping around from all sides and not only present at the top, what this means is that your channel controllability is improved significantly. So what this leads to is, this leads to uniform electric fields, and hence even your VT distribution is tighter. Okay. Now, is this the only advantage? No. The other advantage is because of this shape. So let me tell you how. So let us look at this, and what we do is we apply a voltage on the control gate. So if you are applying a voltage on a control gate, electric field lines will kind of emanate from here. So perpendicular to this, electric field lines will emanate. Perpendicular to the surface point, electric fields will emanate. Here also electric field lines will emanate. Here also electric field lines will emanate like this. So you'll have electric field lines going like this. Right? They'll start from the kind of control gate, and then they'll go towards the channel. So if, just by looking at these field lines, what can you conclude? So if you look at these field lines, you can see that the density of these field lines in this layer, in the blocking oxide layer. So let us look at the density of these field lines in the blocking oxide layer and comment on it. So the density of electric field lines in the blocking oxide layer is lower as compared to density of these field lines in tunneling oxide. So in close to the tunneling oxide, if you see this kind of overlap, and because of this overlap, the effective field increases. So this is the usual kind of norm that the density of these electric field lines give you the electric field strength. So what can we comment about the strength? So just because of this kind of shape, this kind of curvature, the strength of your electric field increases in tunneling oxide and it reduces in your blocking oxide. And how does this help our cause? So let us look at different program and erase behavior. So let us look at the electric field plots during program, which is shown here, and erase. So during program, we want as high electric field. So this is your tunneling oxide electric field. This is your storage layer. This is your blocking oxide. This is your tunneling oxide. This is your storage layer. This is your blocking oxide. And the dots kind of represents your conventional rectangular kind of a channel where the gate is on the top, while this solid line represents your gate all around cylindrical CT. So if you look at these two different, like the field distribution during programming image, you'll observe that in both these cases, E field increases significantly at tunneling oxide, while it reduces at your blocking oxide. Even compared to your conventional thing, the electric field has reduced significantly. Program, what this leads to is higher electric field means higher injection of electrons, and higher injection, what does that mean? That means more memory window. In erase time, what that means? High electric field in tunneling oxide means higher injection of holes. Higher injection of holes. And now once these holes are injected, it will make the erase process fast. Fast, yeah. Also at the same time, since your field in your blocking oxide is less, there won't be back tunneling. So back tunneling is reduced. Back tunneling is kind of reduced. So this also mitigates your erase saturation. So erase saturation is kind of mitigated or significantly suppressed when you're going with this gate-all-around kind of structure. So this gate-all-around kind of charge-trap structure is really advantageous, and this is the kind of structure which is used in your 3D NAND flash memory. And that is why I kind of started with this and gave you kind of introduction to this. Now with this understanding of gate-all-around charge-trap memories and how they can be integrated in your 3D NAND flash memories, let us go ahead and discuss why do we exactly want to 3D stack the floating gate memories or the NAND flash memories. Can't we just scale them horizontally and then work around that? So let me just go ahead and talk about the need for this 3D stacking of floating gate memories. So first of all, let me discuss the different challenges while scaling your floating gate memories. So let me write that as well. So what are different challenges while scaling your floating gate cells? So the most common challenges or the most important challenges are, first, there is this fabrication complexity. So below this 20 nanometer technology node, they have to use EUV. So earlier they used to use this immersion lithography, which kind of worked fine till 20 nanometer technology node for fabrication of this FG flash. But now they have to switch to EUV and stepper technology if they have to kind of scale it below 20 nanometers. They can do that. It will require a lot of investment, and industries have already invested in EUV and they are kind of using EUVs for 7 nanometer technology nodes and below. But even if they do that, the problem is, as I already told, cells are placed so close that the neighbor disturb effects have increased significantly. That is, what is happening is, you kind of program one control gate, but the device which is adjacent to it, that gets programmed. Such is the level of capacitive coupling between the two. That is, the coupling has increased to a level that we can't work independently with one cell. Other cells will definitely be affected because of this. Okay. Apart from that, what are the other reasons? So, scaling your floating gate simply means reducing the volume over which electrons are stored, right? And nowadays, even in your 20 nanometer technology node floating gate cells, almost 10 electrons are responsible to kind of encode one memory state or one threshold voltage value. So if there are only 10 electrons which are responsible to encode one threshold voltage value, loss of even 5 electrons out of that will lead to incorrect operation, will lead to heat failure. And with these, scaling comes these challenges such as random dopant fluctuation. And your random telegraph noise also increases with scaling. How? If you have a very small thickness, then even one trap, if it's there, And if there are only 10 electrons, then even if there is only one trap, its impact will be more as compared to when there are 100 electrons and there is one trap, right? So with scaling process, even if there are only few traps, so let me write that. Even if there are only few traps, the impact or the variation, I would say the variation would be significant. And this RDF, this also leads to a variation in the threshold voltage. So the VT distribution, and I'll call this the native VT distribution. Native VT distribution or the virgin VT distribution, so as to kind of distinguish this from erase or program VT distribution. So even the VT distribution or the native VT distribution, that is very spread. And if the native distribution is still like that is in itself spread, other mechanism will only add to it, and at the end what you'll observe is that your program and erase VT are also like VT kind of distribution. Like, let me also VT distribution will kind of also overlap. Overlap in this program erase VT distribution, it will definitely lead to failures, and therefore the yield is low, and also program erase failure is there. So error correction circuitry's role becomes even more important. You need more error correction circuitry and all those things. So that way, its scaling is not very advantageous. Even if you have, come up with some new technology, you have used EUV and all those things. So what people say is, instead of, scaling them in the horizontal direction, why not stack them on top of each other without even increasing the physical area? Let us increase the density by just stacking them on top of each other. One such attempt was to, stack this floating gate cells on top of each other, which is shown over here. So here you can see that there is this first layer of floating gate NAND cell, and then on top of it there is this second layer of floating gate NAND cell, and this bit line is kind of shared between the two through this kind of thing, which is called a via. But here, how is it different than the conventional via that connects? Like, so you have vias which connect different metal layers in a layout. But here, this via is kind of connecting one layer of 3D NAND flash, like one layer of NAND flash cells with the another layer. So you have one silicon wafer here, you have one silicon wafer here, and on top of it you have different silicon wafer or different layer. So you have two different chunks of silicon. It may not be wafer, it may be a silicon which has been grown, but you have different pieces of silicon on top of each other, which you have to connect with the help of a via. So this kind of via is called a through silicon via or TSV. This is also one of the very interesting kind of area of research nowadays. So it's called through silicon via, and it is used to connect two different wafers, connect two different layers in a chip where you have these and this is one of the major components. It's one of the major component of your 3D integration. Okay, so now let us look at this structure where you have stacked floating gate layers. So can you just think about a typical problem that they may face while doing that? So you have this single crystalline silicon. On top of it, you did all the processing, you fabricated this floating gate cells, and now you have to again get the single crystalline silicon on top of it. So if you know to grow single crystalline silicon or monocrystalline silicon, we have to heat it at a very high temperature, greater than 1100 degrees Celsius. So if we kind of heat it to that level, the underlying layer that can be damaged, right? So one of the problems while stacking like NAND flash cells in this kind of floating gate NAND cells in this kind of fashion is your thermal budget. So creation of this, single crystalline silicon layer on top of another like processed kind of a NAND flash layer is very difficult. So in 3D NAND flash memories, how people overcome this is they kind of use polysilicon. So if it is polysilicon, it can be deposited at low temperatures using CVD. However, the quality of polysilicon is kind of low, and that will lead to another set of problems that we'll discuss later when we'll focus on the 3D NAND flash. So if you look at the 3D kind of structure, you'll see that you have these word lines. These are different word lines of this layer, and then this is your bit line select, and this is the bit line select of the adjacent kind of NAND kind of string. So this is one string. Let's call it. Let's kind of write somewhere that this is one string. This is second string. This is third string. This is fourth string. So it's like you have 1, 2, 3, 4 strings which are shown over here. These are the bit select line transistors of these 4 strings, and these are the word lines of different strings. And you see that this line is bit line contact is kind of common to all the strings. So the bit lines are all connected over here. So here if you see, you have this source line also common between these 4 strings. So you have this string, this string, this string, and this string. You have source line common between the strings. You have bit lines common between the strings. Like you also have these bit lines which are common. And this red line is kind of your metal one, which is kind of connecting your bit lines together. And for these source lines, for this source line also, which is here, there will be something which is going along this direction. I mean, let me draw with another pen. So the source line connection would also be there, but it will be going along this direction. I mean, into the page, and there would be another layer which would be, connecting it. So this is the kind of structure, like 3D kind of a structure of this, where you have a string, and on top of that string you have another string, and they're kind of connected with the help of this through silicon via. So although this process is kind of costly. Why is it costly? Because every time you process a new layer, you have to go through the same fabrication steps, and that makes it costly. And also it's complex. The thermal budget kind of makes it almost impossible to make, but even if somehow you can come up with this, then it will be very costly and complex. Let us also talk about the advantages. This also comes with some advantages. The first advantage that it gives you is that since you are kind of manufacturing each layer independently, you have a strict control over your fabrication parameters. So that will give you kind of a better yield of each layer. So the performance of each layer can be kept under control just because you have strict control over the fabrication process of each of these layers. Also, the advantage of this is you can share your peripheral circuitries amongst different layers. So even the area efficiency is improved further just because of this sharing.